My name is Ellie, and after devoting 5 years of my life to caring for my grandmother, I walked out of her funeral with nothing. Not a cent, not a room, not even a kind word. What I uncovered that day changed everything. And now, I'm done playing the quiet one. Where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I'd love to see how far this story reaches. And if you've ever felt betrayed by the people closest to you, this one's for you. I can still hear the clock ticking in the parlor, that slow, funeral kind of tick that always made Grandma laugh, calling it dramatic background music. I don't think she would have been laughing today. The will reading happened right there, right after her burial. Family still in black, coffee still steaming, faces still tight with grief or something pretending to be it. Per the last will and testament of Margaret Calloway, Mr. Harding said, adjusting his glasses with a sigh too long to be innocent, the Vermont estate shall go to her son and daughter-in-law, Charles and Maureen Calloway. My father and mother, he continued. Financial accounts and assets are to be transferred to Vanessa Calloway, my sister, and to Ellie Calloway. He paused. My name hung in the air like fog. No specific bequests. A long, cruel silence wrapped around the room. It didn't register at first. I blinked, wondering if I'd missed something. Maybe he was circling back around. Maybe there was a second document. But then Vanessa laughed light, sharp, like breaking ice. Maybe Grandma just knew you'd never make use of it, she said, crossing her legs with a smirk that didn't belong in mourning. The air in the parlor shifted, tightened. That can't be right, I managed, my voice smaller than I wanted. I took care of her. I was with her every day. You sure you don't want to contest it? My father muttered without looking at me. Might be a good way to waste more time and money, Ellie. My mother touched his arm like she was trying to shush him, but her eyes never met mine. I turned to Mr. Harding. Did she really write this herself? I mean all of it. He cleared his throat and adjusted his papers. It's notarized, witnessed, dated. There's no indication of foul play, Miss Calloway. Of course not, Vanessa chimed, sipping lukewarm coffee. Not everything's a conspiracy, you know. I stood there, still in my funeral dress, hands trembling, trying to process what had just happened. 5 years of sponge baths, medication schedules, midnight calls. I was the one who lived here. They all visited for holidays and left early. And now, they inherited the life I kept warm for Grandma until the very end. I gave up my job to stay here, I said quietly. I cooked for her. I handled her finances. I slept on that creaky attic cot for 5 years. Well, clearly she didn't think that counted, my father cut in. Let it go, Ellie, it's done. No, I said, a sharpness rising in my throat. No, this doesn't make sense. And that's when the room erupted. My aunt tried to interject something about respecting her wishes. My cousin murmured about boundaries. My mother said my grief was making me confused. My sister just smiled wider. It wasn't a will reading. It was a public unmasking. Everyone who had been too polite to say what they really thought of me finally had an excuse to let it out. You were always so intense, Vanessa said, folding her arms. Like taking care of Grandma gave you a moral high ground. Sorry it didn't come with a paycheck. The words hit like slaps, not just because they hurt, but because they confirmed what I'd suspected for years. They resented me, all of them. They didn't see what I did as sacrifice. They saw it as weakness. I left that parlor on shaking legs, my grandmother's last memory still thick in the walls around me. But as I stepped into the cold November wind, one thought repeated itself louder than the others. This isn't over. The attic was colder than usual when I got back, like the heat hadn't dared follow me upstairs. I didn't even bother turning on the light. I just stood in the doorway, coat still on, gloves in my pocket, as the silence pressed against my skin like snow that never melts. The stairs creaked behind me as I slowly shut the door, sealing myself inside the one room that was ever mine in this house. If you could even call it a room. The cot squeaked as I sat down. My heels had dug lines into the back of my feet. Funeral shoes never did fit right. I reached for the chipped teacup on the nightstand. Peppermint. The scent still clung to the rim. My grandmother used to steep it for me when the nights ran long and the grief crept in early. I held it to my chest like it could stop the shaking. It should have been different. After everything, it should have been so different. Downstairs, I'd barely made it out of the parlor before the whispers started. My name, passed around like something embarrassing no one wanted to claim. Vanessa laughing with that hollow kind of joy only money can buy. My father pretending not to hear me. My mother straightening the wool packet like that single gesture could erase 5 years of sacrifice. I'd spent more nights in this attic than I care to count. Sleepless, cold, listening to Grandma's soft coughing from the floor below, terrified I'd miss a cry for help. They'd been gone, all of them too busy, too far, too disinterested. But I stayed. I stayed through the falls. Through the Christmas Eves spent adjusting oxygen tubes. Through every heartbreak where she was the only one who held me and told me I was worth more. And now they get the house. The money. The legacy I get. This room. The smallest room in a home I kept breathing for her when no one else would. I stood up and began to pace. My fingers itched for something to do to make sense of it all, but nothing made sense. Not the will, not the silence, not how Mr. Harding hadn't even looked surprised. "This doesn't make sense," I murmured to no one. She loved me. She told me nearly every day, even when the strokes slurred her words and her memory faltered. She called me her anchor, her keeper. She'd squeeze my hand in moments of lucidity and say, "You know what's fair, Ellie, you always do." She would never cut me out like this. Unless she didn't write that version of the will. The thought hit me like a slap. I stumbled a little, caught my breath. My reflection in the attic window stared back at me, tired eyes, smeared mascara, lips trembling. But behind the grief, behind the disbelief, a flicker of something steadier. No, not a flicker. A spark. If she didn't change that will herself, someone else did. Someone who needed it to look that way. Someone who stood to gain the most. Who had already started decorating new rooms downstairs and smiling through funeral wine like none of this was out of place. Vanessa. I crossed to the corner of the room, where the old storage trunk sat half buried under folded blankets. My grandmother used to call it her memory box, but I hadn't opened it since her last hospital stay. Something in me resisted disturbing it. Until now, I hesitated, fingers on the latch, not tonight, not yet. My breath was shaky as I backed away, sinking into the cot again. My thoughts were sprinting, but my body felt like stone. Exhaustion twisted through me like a vice, but I knew I wouldn't sleep. Not tonight. I looked up at the sloped ceiling and whispered, "You wouldn't have done this to me, I know you wouldn't." And that's when I felt it, the shift. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was calculation, something deeper, sharper. This wasn't just a mistake. It was deliberate, precise. And if it was deliberate, it could be undone. The next morning, I skipped breakfast. No one invited me to eat anyway. Downstairs smelled like scrambled eggs and syrup, but the silence when I passed through the kitchen was louder than any slammed door. My mother stirred her coffee as if I were invisible. My father sat at the head of the table, scrolling his phone. Vanessa scrolled hers too. Same posture, same indifference. Nobody looked up. Good. I didn't want small talk. I didn't want hollow apologies or a sudden change in tone now that the drama had cooled. I wanted facts, documents, names. That's when I called Andrew Knox. Andrew wasn't some high-powered firm partner in a downtown skyscraper. He was the kind of lawyer you found through whispered referrals from friends who had quietly fought back against things most people didn't want to admit happened. He used to work estate fraud cases in Boston before moving back to Vermont after a divorce. The kind of man who knew how to keep a secret and dig for the ones buried under polished wood floors. I told him everything. At least everything I knew. "I'm not sure what I'm asking for," I admitted during our call, pacing outside the back porch in my coat and boots. I need to know if what happened was legal." "I don't do feelings," he replied, but not unkindly. "I do paper trails. Bring me what you have." His office was located above a tailor's shop on Main Street, one of those converted brick walk-ups with uneven floors and a bell on the door that jingled like an old sitcom. The receptionist was also his paralegal. Her name was Bernice, and she handed me a clipboard without asking questions. I liked her immediately. Andrew Knox looked like someone who hadn't slept well since the early 2000s. Tired eyes, salt and pepper stubble, and the kind of posture that said he'd seen too many fights up close. He gestured for me to sit. "So let's walk through this slowly." I gave him dates, details, Grandma's declining health, the timeline of her last hospital visit, who was in the house, who wasn't. I showed him the funeral program, the obituary, the will copy Mr. Harding had provided, still folded with creases so sharp it looked like a knife had passed through the paper. Andrew read in silence for a long time, lips pressing into a thin line. When he finally looked up, his voice was clipped. "No mention of you, not even as a backup beneficiary." I nodded. "And your grandmother previously said you were her primary caregiver." "For 5 years," I said. "She told me she called me her keeper. She always said I'd be taken care of." "Were there previous versions of the will?" he asked. I blinked. "What do you mean?" He leaned back. "Most people revise their wills, especially if there are health changes or new family developments. If this is the only version in circulation and it surfaced after she passed, that's a flag." "What kind of flag?" "The forgery kind." My stomach tightened. "But," he added, holding up a finger, "a flag isn't a case, it's a possibility. The will is dated, notarized, witnessed. And without another version to compare it to, or without proof of mental incompetency at the time it was signed, it's airtight." "But she was unwell," I argued. "She was barely coherent the last 6 months. Medical records could help, but only if they show she wasn't mentally competent on the date that signature was made. That's a hard needle to thread." I stared at the copy on his desk. The lines blurred slightly. "So what now?" He slid the document toward me. "Unless new evidence surfaces, there's nothing we can do. This is legally flawless." The words hit harder than I expected. Legally flawless. As if the entire betrayal could be ironed flat and stamped approved by law. My hands trembled slightly as I folded the will and tucked it into my purse. I nodded but didn't speak. Didn't trust myself to. Andrew stood, offering a small card. "If anything changes, if you find something, anything, we can reopen this." I thanked him, though I don't remember exactly what I said. The office door shut behind me, the little bell jingled, and I stood on the sidewalk, Vermont wind stinging my cheeks. Nothing, I had nothing. I pulled my coat tighter and walked, not toward home, just away. Down icy sidewalks, past antique shops and shuttered cafes, until I found myself outside the old greenhouse behind the church. It had been abandoned since the storm last spring. Glass shattered on one side. The inside was mostly empty. I stepped in. The air inside was cold still. My breath fogged in front of me. I sank onto an overturned crate, pulling the folded will from my purse. I stared at it for a long time. This piece of paper had more authority over my life than 5 years of devotion. They'd stolen her voice. They'd erased my name. And the worst part, they knew I wouldn't fight. But what if they were wrong? I didn't come back to the house until nearly midnight. The lights were off in the main rooms, but I knew they'd hear me when the front door clicked. I wasn't trying to sneak. I wanted them to know I had something to say, something they wouldn't ignore this time. By morning, I'd barely slept, but I was steady. I waited until everyone had settled in, Vanessa fussing with her new curling iron in the hall bathroom, my mother scraping burnt toast into the sink, and my father grumbling over something in the local paper. It was choreographed domesticity, the kind that makes you think everything's fine if you don't look too closely. I didn't wait for an invitation. I simply walked into the kitchen holding a legal pad with numbers scribbled in red ink. "Can we talk?" They all looked up. My father narrowed his eyes. My mother folded her arms. Vanessa kept chewing her cereal. "I'd like to propose something fair." A silence followed, sharper than yesterday's, more watchful. I took a breath. "We sell the estate, the house, divide the proceeds 3 ways. Vanessa and I each take a portion to buy our own apartments. You and Mom downsize to something manageable. Everybody wins." Vanessa let out a short laugh. "You want this house sold." My father gave her a look, then turned to me. "Ellie, this house is not on the market." "It should be," I said calmly. "Grandma couldn't climb stairs for the last 2 years. The upkeep is impossible for one couple, let alone 3 separate households under one roof. It's not practical." "We're keeping it," my father said, like that ended the discussion. My mother sipped her coffee, quiet, watching. "Then I expect to live here under the same standards as everyone else," I replied. "Fair room, equal say in decisions, shared costs." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, you're not going to guilt your way into a renovation." "I'm not guilting anyone," I said, the words sharper than I intended. "I'm stating a fact. I gave up years of my life to keep this place running. Now you want to pretend I never existed." "We're not doing this," my father said, standing. "The house stays. End of story." "Then my room needs to reflect that decision," I said firmly. "Be moving into Grandma's room. It has heat and windows." My mother flinched slightly, her spoon pausing halfway to her mouth. "You think you can make demands?" my father growled. "No," I said, standing straighter. "I'm giving you an option. The alternative is that I take legal action based on caregiver contributions. I spoke to a lawyer yesterday. He says if I find evidence the will was altered when Grandma was mentally unfit, this whole thing changes." My father's jaw twitched. Vanessa scoffed. "You're bluffing." "I'm not," I said. "And you know that if you had paid any attention the past 5 years." The kitchen was thick with tension, the kind that usually ends with doors slamming. But I didn't move. I stood in it, let them feel it. My mother finally set down her mug. "We'll think about it," she said softly. That was the first real shift. Her voice, not my father's, not Vanessa's. For the first time, my mother didn't just parrot someone else's decision. I nodded. "That's all I'm asking." I turned and walked out, leaving the legal pad on the table. Vanessa muttered something under her breath, but no one laughed. I sat out on the porch for the next hour, notebook in hand, tracking every detail of the house. When the shingles were replaced, what heating vents worked, where Grandma kept her old papers. I knew the house better than any of them. I knew where she used to stash receipts and write notes to herself on the backs of utility bills. Let them pretend I didn't belong here. I'd been here all along. They waited 2 days. 2 full days of vague silences, closed doors, and conversations that paused whenever I entered a room. Then my father cleared his throat at breakfast and said, "We've prepared a space for you. You can start moving your things today." He said it like it was a favor, like I hadn't already lived in this house longer than anyone else combined in the past decade. Vanessa chimed in without lifting her eyes from her phone. "You're gonna love it. Real cozy." I didn't respond, just nodded and stood, gathering my plate even though I hadn't touched my eggs. I followed my mother down the west hallway, far from the bedrooms we'd all grown up in, past the linen closet and through a narrow door I'd never seen used. "The maids' quarters," she explained quietly, flipping on the light. "We thought it made the most sense." The smell hit first. Dampness, sealed air, and something sour that clung to the wallpaper like mildew mixed with old regret. There was no window. Just a cracked cot pushed into the corner, a sagging shelf, and a single overhead bulb that flickered twice before settling into a weak buzz. The walls were stained in patches where the wallpaper had peeled. The ceiling sloped just enough to bump your head if you sat up too quickly. And the floor dipped near the closet like the foundation was quietly giving up. "It's not a punishment," my mother said, not meeting my eyes. "Of course not," I replied, voice flat. But we both knew what this was. "Some fresh paint, a lamp, maybe a new rug," she offered. "Make it your own." I stepped inside, boots thudding against the warped floorboards. It wasn't a room. It was a corner someone had cleared out just far enough from the rest of the house to forget I was there. Vanessa appeared in the doorway, filming on her phone. "Oh, wow, welcome to the servants' suite, Ellie." She zoomed in on the peeling corner of the wall. "We're calling this segment Extreme Charity, Family Edition." I said nothing. I didn't give her the satisfaction of reacting. "Come on, Vanessa," my mom muttered. "Oh, I'm just capturing memories," she replied, still grinning. "For her scrapbook, you know. Here lies the family disappointment. She lived in a shoe." She laughed at her own joke. I turned slowly and set down the single box I'd carried. "This will do," I said quietly, because I knew something she didn't. This wasn't the end of my story. This was the setting for a transformation. And she'd just given me the best possible origin point. A forgotten wing, a cracked floor, a room no one respected. Perfect. That night I unpacked with quiet precision. Each item was placed with intention, the chipped tea cup on the shelf, Grandma's prayer beads on the cot post, my college notebook beside the bed, and a copy of the will now creased and annotated in my drawer. The cot creaked when I sat. From down the hall I could hear Vanessa's music blasting. She was redecorating her room. I'd seen the swatches this morning. Velvet curtains, pendant chandeliers, some wallpaper influencer she followed online. She'd picked the biggest bedroom. She always had. That used to sting. But now it clarified something. They'd underestimated me. They'd assumed this room would humiliate me, that I'd sink into it, shrink. But they forgot what I'd survived up here when Grandma was sick. I'd slept on floors harder than this, dealt with nights colder, cried into pillows stiffer. I'd held a woman's hand while she forgot her name but still remembered mine. This room had nothing on that. This wasn't exile. This was silence. And in silence, things grow. Renovations started a week later. The house was never quiet after that. Hammering by 8 a.m., contractors stomping up and down the hallways, paint fumes thick in the air. Somewhere a new chandelier was being installed with painstaking care. Meanwhile, my room still smelled like the inside of an abandoned cabinet. No one asked if I needed anything fixed. Not that I expected them to. I spent most days behind my closed door studying. A graduate program I'd paused during Grandma's final decline still loomed, and I was trying to pick the pieces back up. Ethics in digital privacy, case law articles. I read them like lifelines, trying to drown out the clamor of power drills and my sister's voice. I saw Vanessa in passing. Always with a latte in hand, always in leggings that cost more than my rent back when I had won. She floated from room to room like a princess overseeing castle upgrades. And our parents, they beamed at her like she was renovating them too. Like her sparkle justified the chaos. One night I was heading to the kitchen when I passed her open door. It stopped me cold. Her room was unrecognizable. Deep green velvet curtains spilled from ceiling to floor. A blush pink chaise lounge curled beneath her bay window, gold drawer pulls. A tiny record player spinning something vintage. The walls glowed under soft lighting. It looked like a set from a home magazine, a fantasy. My mother stood beside her, holding up a frame. "We'll put your baby photos here," she said. "Balance the gold tones." "I love it," Vanessa chirped. "It's perfect." I took a step inside. "Mom," I said, quiet but clear, "can I talk to you about my room?" They both turned. "Of course," she said, her smile flickering ever so slightly. Vanessa just leaned back on her chaise, amused. "I was wondering," I said, careful not to sound bitter, "if there's a budget for improvements, even just a new cot or maybe," my mother blinked. "Oh, sweetheart, we paid for hers." I froze. "You what?" "For her redesign," she added gently, as if kindness would soften the sentence. "It came from the estate budget, you know, for the house." I blinked. "Did anyone approve money for mine?" A pause too long. "I didn't think you'd want one," she said finally. "You've always been low maintenance." That wasn't a compliment, it was an excuse. "I'd like to paint," I said, "at least." "Of course," she replied quickly, and I could hear the edge. "Just paint, don't push it." I nodded once and turned to leave, but then Vanessa called out after me. "Make sure it's a light color," she said with a laugh. "You don't want to make that little box feel even smaller." I paused in the hallway. "I'll keep that in mind," I replied, but I didn't turn around. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing my hands shake. That night I didn't sleep. Not because of the hammering or the music or even the constant laughter echoing through the halls like a cruel joke. I didn't sleep because something inside me finally cracked open. It wasn't rage. It was clarity. They didn't just want me quiet. They wanted me invisible. They were building a world around me where I didn't exist. But I was still here, breathing their air, listening, watching, waiting. The first party started on a Friday night. I knew it was coming. Vanessa had mentioned a small get-together at dinner, twirling her fork like it was a microphone. My father grunted something vaguely permissive, and my mother said, "Just keep it down, honey." In that way she always did when she didn't want to deal with consequences. By 9 p.m., the estate's old halls pulsed with music. Not just music, bass. Thudding, heartbeat-bending bass that rattled my floorboards and knocked a framed photo off the crooked shelf in my room. I picked it up. Grandma's face stared back at me through cracked glass. Downstairs, laughter spilled into the halls. Doors slammed. Heels clicked across hardwood. Someone shouted, "Beer pongs in the sunroom," followed by a chorus of whoops. I texted Vanessa, "Hey, can you keep it down a little? I'm trying to study." No reply. I waited 10 minutes, then 20. By the time I made it down the hall, dodging a guy in a flannel shirt who looked lost, the kitchen was full of people I didn't recognize. Red Solo cups, music videos blaring on a tablet, chips ground into the floor like confetti. Vanessa spotted me and lit up, waving like we were best friends at brunch. "Hey, Rumi," she shouted. "Come have a drink." I pulled her aside. "Vanessa, I'm trying to work. This isn't a dorm." She blinked, fake offended. Okay, sorry, Mom. I'm serious. Ellie, she said, stepping back with a smile so sharp it cut, you're always serious. You live like we're in a library. It's Friday night. And this is a shared house. She laughed again. Correction, our house, you just sleep here. I stared at her. The music surged. Someone opened a can of beer and foam hit the floor. You don't even care what this place meant to Grandma, do you? I asked, voice low. Vanessa rolled her eyes. She's gone, Ellie, move on. The next morning, I found a stranger passed out on the upstairs couch and 2 cigarette butts smoldering in the potted plant by the entryway. I went straight to the kitchen, where my parents were sitting, my mother reading mail, my father stirring coffee. I want the parties to stop, I said, holding nothing back. It's not safe and it's completely inappropriate. I couldn't sleep. Someone was smoking indoors. People I don't even know were in the house. Ellie, my father cut in, don't make a scene. My jaw locked. I'm not making a scene, I said. I'm pointing out boundaries. She's just letting off steam, my mother added gently. Let her enjoy herself. She's celebrating her new start. I blinked. And what am I doing then, mourning mine? They both looked at me like I'd said something in another language. You've always been dramatic, my father muttered. Maybe you need to get out more, my mother added, trying to soften the insult. I stared at them both. The thing is, it wasn't their words that hurt the most. It was the ease with which they dismissed me, like I was some bitter footnote in a chapter they'd already skimmed past. Back in my room, I shut the door and leaned against it. The music was gone. The party over, but I still heard the echoes. They didn't see me. Not really. Not as someone who mattered. And yet, I was the one holding this house together not long ago. The one who knew where every fuse box lived when the pipes creaked, how Grandma liked her soup when her appetite was thin. Vanessa could throw all the parties she wanted, but none of them knew this house. Not like I did. And maybe that would matter soon. I hadn't celebrated my birthday in years. Not properly. Not with cake or string lights or anyone singing off-key. The last time I'd made a wish, I was 25 and too tired to believe in any of it. But this year, after everything, after the will, the basement room, the constant erasure, I needed something that was mine, just a small gathering. No speeches. No demands, just laughter, light, and the people who hadn't disappeared when things got hard. I texted Julia, thinking of doing something low-key in the garden, just cupcakes and music. Too much. She replied in seconds. Too perfect. I'll bring the lights. That Saturday afternoon, while Vanessa was out getting her nails done and my parents were conveniently out for dinner, I set up in the back garden. The same one Grandma used to prune every morning in her robe and slippers, humming Patsy Cline like a ritual. I swept the stone path, unraveled the extension cord, strung dollar store fairy lights along the broken trellis. Julia arrived first with her boyfriend Nate, then Elena, then 2 friends from the university who'd heard my name whispered like myth but never met me in real life. Everyone brought something: lemonade, card games, a portable speaker. One girl made cupcakes with lavender frosting. By sunset, the garden glowed. Music floated softly above the hedges. We sat on mismatched cushions around the patio, passing plates, sharing old stories. For the first time in months, I felt visible. Like someone again. Not a ghost in the West Wing, not a mistake in a family photo, just Ellie. Julia handed me a small candle and grinned. Make a wish, but don't ask for a new family. That's cheating. I laughed. Everyone leaned in. I closed my eyes, and just as I opened my mouth to blow it out, Ellie, my father's voice shattered the moment like glass on tile. He stormed down the steps from the back porch, fists clenched. What the hell is this? The music stopped. Conversations froze mid-laugh. I stood up. It's just a birthday gathering. On this property, he snapped. Without clearing it, I didn't realize I needed clearance to sit in a garden. This is our house. You don't get to host events like you own it. It's not an event, I said, cheeks burning. It's cake and chairs. This ends now, everyone out. For a moment, no one moved. Then Nate stood, slow and steady. Sir, it's just a few of us. We'll clean up. I set out. He didn't shout it. He didn't have to. Humiliation was already loud enough. Julia gave me a look, apology and fire all in one, then squeezed my hand. We'll take it inside, she whispered. I nodded, unable to speak. One by one, they helped me gather the lights, the plates, the crumbs of something I'd barely begun to build. Vanessa appeared in the window upstairs, watching like a queen surveying peasants. Back in my room, we crammed onto the cot and floor. Nate played music from his phone, low and warm. Elena lit a candle in an empty. Julia handed me another cupcake, this time without a wish. "We celebrate anyway," she said. I smiled through the tears in my throat. They stayed for hours, talking, laughing, filling the room with something thick and healing. It wasn't a party anymore. It was a rebellion. Quiet, stubborn, real, and I knew no matter how much they tried to erase me, I had people who saw me, people who wouldn't let me disappear. The next morning, the garden was spotless again. You'd never know joy had bloomed there just hours earlier. But something had shifted, not out there in me. I woke up feeling like someone had pressed a reset button inside my chest. My feet hit the floor with purpose. My spine straightened. The cot still creaked. The air was still cold, but none of it felt quite as heavy anymore. That birthday night had planted something, so I started to build on it. The birthday money from Julia and the others wasn't much, but it was enough to buy a few cans of paint and a cheap lamp from the hardware store. I spent the afternoon brushing pale yellow over the mildewed walls, turning the stale, windowless room into something just a little less oppressive. By evening, I had a new shelf stacked with old books and a second-hand rug soft enough to sit on. A space that didn't feel like a punishment anymore, just mine. I was dragging the old wardrobe across the floor, hoping to center it better beneath the sloped ceiling, when it scraped against the far wall with a groan and shuddered slightly. That's when I saw it. A flap of yellowed tape curling loose behind where the back panel had been pressed flat for decades. My heart did a double beat. I crouched down, pried it free. An envelope. Not just any envelope, a thick, ivory one, sealed carefully and labeled in handwriting I hadn't seen in months. Ellie. My throat closed. I sat on the floor right where I found it, legs folding under me like a child at story time. My fingers trembled as I slid the letter free. The ink was faint in places, wobbly, but still unmistakable. If you're reading this, Ellie, then they've done exactly what I feared. They've taken the house from you. I tried to stop them, I really did. But by the end, they were all smiles and papers and whispers. And my head wasn't what it used to be. This is the original version of my will. I never changed it, I never would. Burn the other caches of documents I've hidden in the estate. They're not meant for anyone else's eyes but mine and yours. Especially not Harding, especially not Vanessa. And don't let them convince you this is how it was supposed to be. I loved you for every hour you stayed, for every teacup, every pill schedule, every time you said no to the life you wanted so I could keep the life I had. I see you. I always did. Don't let them win. With all my love, Grandma, I didn't cry. Not at first. I just held the letter in both hands like something holy. And for the first time since that cold reading in the parlor, I felt anchored, not spinning, not lost, not gaslit into doubting what I knew. She remembered. She knew. Everything I'd felt, every twisted instinct, every quiet fury I couldn't prove, it had all been real. And this paper in my hand wasn't just a letter, it was evidence. It was a voice louder than any party music, any smug smirk, any dismissive shrug. It was hers, and it was enough to burn the whole lie down. I stared at the wardrobe, chest rising and falling in waves. What else had she hidden? What did she mean by other caches? My eyes swept the room, then the hallway, then the house in my mind. The hollow corners, the old floorboards, the places she used to stand when no one was watching. She'd left a trail, and now I was going to follow it. I didn't sleep the night before. Instead, I sat cross-legged on the rug in my tiny room, the folder open on my lap like it might disappear if I blinked. I must have read Grandma's letter a dozen times, each time slower, trying to absorb the weight behind every line. She knew. She saw it coming. She'd fought it the only way she could, with ink and secrecy and a trust in me that burned hotter than anything I'd felt in months. And now it was my turn to fight back. The county courthouse stood like a stone giant in the center of town, its steps iced over from last night's frost. I clutched the folder beneath my coat, a strange mix of terror and clarity buzzing under my skin. A guard scanned me at the door. I nodded politely. Inside, everything echoed, voices, heels on marble, the soft beep of elevators. I found Prosecutor Maynard's office tucked between family services and a records archive. A gold plaque on the door read Alton Maynard, Deputy County Prosecutor. I knocked once. A pause, then "Come in." He stood when I entered. "Miss Raines." "Yes," I said. "Thank you for seeing me on short notice." His handshake was firm, professional. He wore a navy tie and carried himself like a man used to people folding under pressure. I didn't plan on folding. "I understand you have documents," he said, motioning to the chair across from his desk. I sat and placed the folder between us. He opened it carefully, first pulling out the envelope, then the letter, then the original will I'd flattened between clean pages the night before. His expression shifted almost immediately. "This is your grandmother's handwriting." "Yes," I said. "I can provide cards and notes to compare. It's hers." He read in silence, first the letter, then the will. Halfway through, he looked up. "Where did you find this?" "Behind the old wardrobe in her original bedroom. It was taped to the wall." He nodded slowly, rereading the paragraph that sealed everything. "If you're reading this, Ellie, then they've done exactly what I feared." He leaned back. "You said the will currently filed was dated. 6 weeks after she was declared mentally unfit. I have her medical notes. And this," I pointed to the signature, "this is her actual one. She used to loop her E like that. The other will doesn't have that." He studied it, flipping to a fresh notepad. "This is serious, Miss Raines. More serious than you may realize." "I do realize," I said. "That's why I'm here. The original will names you as sole beneficiary of the estate. Property, assets, personal effects, everything." I nodded. "That's what she told me before everything changed." He exhaled slowly, folding his hands. "This letter and the will, combined with her mental health records, form the foundation of a fraud investigation. If the filed will postdates her legal competency, it was not valid. If someone intentionally submitted it knowing that, they committed a crime." I finished for him. He nodded. "And if Mr. Harding, the family lawyer, knowingly filed it, we'll subpoena his records," Maynard said. "Check for edits, file access, communications with your family. We'll also need your statement, and we'll begin forensic handwriting analysis on both wills." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It wasn't just about suspicion anymore. This was real. "This will take time," he added. "But this," he tapped the folder, "this is the kind of thing that tips the scales." I looked down at Grandma's handwriting again, the slant, the slight tremor in the ink, her last defense. "She was terrified they'd rewrite her life," I whispered. He met my eyes. "They tried, but I'm going to make sure they don't succeed." I walked out of the courthouse into the cold with my coat wrapped tight and my chin lifted higher than it had been in months. Let Vanessa have her velvet curtains. Let my parents sip their coffee in smug silence. Let them all prepare for the next party like the house was theirs to give away. Because they'd forgotten something vital. I had the truth. And now, the law was on my side. Vanessa's birthday was always a performance. Growing up, she made PowerPoints for her gift lists, demanded themes like French Riviera glam and Gossip Girl garden, and once threatened to cancel the entire event when Mom made the cake from a box mix. This year was no different. The estate ballroom, formerly Grandma's parlor, was decked out in white roses, hanging lanterns, and a rented DJ booth. Fairy lights crisscrossed the vaulted ceiling. Champagne flutes gleamed in long rows. And near the back, a massive printed banner read, "Happy 30th, Vanessa, Queen of the Estate." The words hit differently now. They felt more like a dare. I didn't dress up. No one expected me to come, least of all Vanessa, who gasped like she'd seen a ghost when I walked in wearing jeans, boots, and the same gray coat I'd worn to the courthouse. "Ellie," she said, voice loud over the music. "Wow, you do remember how to socialize." I smiled. Wouldn't miss it. People were milling around with canapes, taking selfies by the fireplace, and complimenting Vanessa on her new wing of the house like it was Versailles. My parents hovered near the bar, clearly relieved that Vanessa had pulled it all off without one of my episodes. But I wasn't here to fight. I was here to end it. Around 9 p.m., Vanessa tapped her glass with a spoon and stepped onto the staircase. Everyone turned. Flashbulbs popped. She beamed. "I just want to say thank you to my incredible parents," she cooed. "For not only throwing this beautiful party, but for trusting me with this home. I am honored, truly honored, to carry on Grandma's legacy." Applause broke out. My father stepped forward, arms slung around Vanessa's shoulder. He smiled broadly. "We couldn't be prouder. Vanessa will be taking over the house officially this year. We've signed it over. It's hers." And that's when I stood. From the corner of the room, I raised my glass, just enough to silence the crowd. "Dad," I said, voice steady, "will you tell her, or should I?" A hush fell. Vanessa blinked. "Tell me what?" My father's smile faltered. "Ellie, don't do this." "She deserves to know," I said calmly, taking a step forward. "They all do." I reached into my coat and pulled out the envelope, the one I'd spent the last week protecting like it was sacred. "This is Grandma's original will," I said, loud and clear. "The one she signed before she was declared mentally unfit. The one you replaced." Gasps rippled through the room. Vanessa's face drained. "That's not possible." I held it up. "It names me as sole heir to the estate. It was hidden behind the wardrobe in her room, along with a letter." I turned to the guests now, letting my voice carry. "In that letter, my grandmother wrote that she feared this exact thing would happen, that the house would be stolen from me while I grieved, that her wishes would be rewritten." "Ellie," my mother said quietly, her voice trembling, "this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," I said, "because I've already submitted it to the prosecutor's office. An investigation is underway." Vanessa stepped forward, voice cracking. "You're making this up. This is just jealousy. Then why did Dad lie?" I cut in. "Why did you both pretend there was no earlier will?" My father's mouth opened, then shut. "You forged it," I said, softer now but cutting. "You signed papers over after Grandma wasn't legally allowed to consent. And now you're standing here acting like this house is yours to give away when it never was." The crowd had gone utterly still. Even the DJ had paused the music. Vanessa stared at me, hands trembling at her sides. You can't do this." "I just did." Silence fell like snow, soft but cold. And then someone from the crowd murmured, "Is that true?" Followed by another whisper. And another. I turned toward my father, now pale and frozen. "It didn't have to be like this," I said. "But you made it this way." Then I walked out, the envelope still in hand, my steps echoing louder than the party ever had. The verdict came down 3 weeks later. I didn't attend the hearing in a courtroom. There wasn't one. The prosecutor had enough evidence from Grandma's original documents and handwriting verification that he filed directly for will invalidation under a state fraud. It went through the probate court like a wave washing over rot. One morning, I opened the mailbox and there it was. A letter from the county of Windham, stamped and sealed. "The estate located at 1299 Harrogate Lane shall revert to the original heir as dictated by the verified will dated October 3rd. That heir was me. They didn't fight it. I half expected another party, or at least a tantrum. But instead, they packed quietly. No slammed doors. No final speeches. My father moved out first, mumbling something about spending time at the lake house. My mother followed a week later, her favorite china clinking softly in a box she refused to label. Neither of them looked me in the eye as they passed me in the foyer. Vanessa lingered. She didn't say anything. She just stood in the main hallway one morning in heels too tall for sadness, scanning the house like it was already a memory. "I didn't think you had it in you," she said finally, voice dull. I said nothing. She walked past me with a purse over her shoulder and her sunglasses on indoors. The door closed behind her like a curtain falling on a bad play. The silence after they left was different. It didn't feel like exile anymore. It felt like peace. I stood in the very center of the house that had once been weaponized against me, the house where I'd been shamed, diminished, and ignored, and for the first time I breathed without waiting for someone to interrupt. The rooms weren't haunted now. They were mine. I spent that first afternoon walking the halls slowly, fingertips brushing the banister Grandma used to lean on, eyes pausing at the window where her plants once soaked in the light. In the parlor, now cleared of Vanessa's party decor, I placed Grandma's photo on the mantel. It was the same one I'd kept hidden in my drawer during all the noise. The one where she's wearing her sweater backwards by accident and laughing anyway. "You always knew," I said softly, and I think she did. 1 year later, the house doesn't look haunted anymore. The walls are warm cream now, soft and sunlit with crown molding that I sanded and painted myself. The windows open easier. The draft in the West Wing is gone. I filled the space with books, music, and air that no longer tastes of betrayal. My room is no longer a cell in the back corner. It's a study now. Bright, orderly, mine. A place where I teach digital ethics courses online 2 days a week. Where I write in the early mornings with a cup of cinnamon tea and the windows cracked open to let the trees speak. Sometimes I catch myself smiling while I work. Not because it's easy, but because it's mine. Vanessa came by once in the spring. She didn't text first, just showed up at the gate in a silver car with new rims and hollow eyes. I opened the front door before she knocked. She didn't ask to come in, just stood on the porch, arms folded. "I just wanted to say sorry," she said. "For everything." I nodded. That was all. She waited for more. I didn't offer it, but I didn't close the door either. She left a few minutes later the same way she arrived, composed, unreadable. That was our ending, and honestly, that was enough. I kept Grandma's letter. It sits in a frame beside her photo on the shelf above my desk, just next to the blue and white teacup she used every morning. The handwriting has faded a bit in the light, but the words are still clear. "I see you." I always did. I read them sometimes when I feel that old silence creeping back in. The kind that once made me doubt everything. Because the truth is, this story was never about revenge. It was about being seen, about remembering who I am when everyone else tried to rewrite me. I still host dinners now and then. Real ones. Julia brings her partner. Elena always shows up with way too much wine. We sit under the string lights I once hung on my birthday, the same ones Dad ripped down, and we laugh until our ribs hurt. They always ask if I'm lonely here now, but I'm not. Not even a little, because this house doesn't echo anymore. It breathes. Sometimes I write letters to Grandma, not to send them, just to feel her near. Today's said, "Justice is remembering who believed in you when no one else did." I signed it, placed it beside her photo, and smiled. Then I opened the window and let the breeze carry the rest away.